In February 2022, the prevailing global assumption was that the fighting in Ukraine would conclude in 3 days. Instead, those 3 days have turned into a years-long war of attrition, over 1 million casualties and 9 million displaced. News reports often focus on the minor shifts of the front line, but these maps don't explain why, in 2026, the conflict has reached a point where neither side can force a conclusion. 3 distinct systems, tactical, political, and economic, now overlap to hold the current front lines in place. Seeing how these systems interact is necessary to understand why a ceasefire remains out of reach. The tension began with the 1991 Soviet collapse, leaving Ukraine navigating the space between a Western future and its historical ties to Moscow. In 2014, Ukrainian protesters ousted a pro-Russian president in favor of closer ties with the European Union. Russia reacted by seizing Crimea and supporting a separatist insurgency in the Donbass. When the 2022 attempt to capture Kyiv failed, both militaries were forced to abandon rapid maneuvers and adopt a permanent defensive posture. This diagram shows the scale of the Surovikin Line, a dense network of deep trenches, concrete barriers, and vast minefields stretching hundreds of miles. Because of drone surveillance and precision artillery, any attempt to breach these layers creates a high-casualty kill zone. The cost of capturing even a few square kilometers is so high that a traditional ground victory is currently a mathematical impossibility for either military. Unable to move the front lines, Russia shifted its strategy towards civilian infrastructure, targeting power grids and gas stations to exhaust the Ukrainian population. Ukraine responded by moving the fight away from the trenches, utilizing swarms of long-range drones to strike deep into Russian territory. By targeting oil refineries and defense factories, Kyiv is attempting to drain the revenue and fuel required to sustain the Kremlin's military operations. This tactical stalemate is mirrored by a complete lack of political overlap. Ukraine requires the return of all territory and formal NATO security guarantees to end the war. Russia, meanwhile, demands the international recognition of its claim to the 20% of Ukrainian land it currently occupies. Moscow is betting that Western support for Ukraine will eventually fade, while Kyiv is betting that strikes and sanctions will eventually cause the Russian economy to fail. These opposing wagers have created a closed loop. The lack of a diplomatic path forward ensures that the military struggle continues indefinitely. While the combatants are locked in a struggle that drains their resources, the war has created a massive economic surplus for third parties. The global defense industry is seeing a sharp increase in orders as Western governments rush to replace the weapons and ammunition sent to the front. Energy markets shifted. When Europe stopped buying Russian gas, the U.S. became the top exporter of liquefied natural gas to the continent. Meanwhile, Russia found buyers in the East. India and China are purchasing Russian oil at discounted rates, lowering their domestic energy costs. This has provided Beijing with significant economic leverage over Moscow, allowing China to expand its influence while the United States remains focused on the European theater. This global ecosystem of profit makes the war harder to end. For these vast corporate and national entities, a sudden ceasefire represents a catastrophic loss of revenue or a shift in geopolitical advantage. As the conflict evolves, tracking these global systems is essential for finding the reality behind the headlines. Subscribe for our next report and follow the link in the description to support the relief organizations assisting those caught in the crossfire.